church, you have to take geography into consideration.
Wow.
Because you can simply determine the demographic of your audience by how far you make them drive to get there.
Wow. That's an important point that a lot of people don't think about.
You can pray all you want. Hey, Lord, I'd like a multicultural community. But if you are positioned such that a person from a certain background would require 100 rands to get to you and back, he's not coming. First Sunday, I announced we need volunteers. There's 25 to 30 black people waiting for me at the door. Pastor, you said, what do you need? Where? Just tell me where. And here's the thing with our black community. If I say to someone, hey, Loops, do me a favor, stand at the door there and greet the people. I must remember I asked that man to do that, because 25 years from now, he's still standing there greeting that. I must go to him and say, you're relieved. You're relieved of your role. You can... colored people. Colored people. Okay. First Sunday they come to church, they're going to come to you and say, Pastor, you can rest now, I'm here. I can preach next Sunday even. I've done a lot of preaching. Can lead worship. My wife, you've never heard a voice like my wife's voice. Take off next Sunday, man. You've been working hard for the Lord. What's wrong with you? Let me tell you another thing, though. It made him unpopular amongst many, but not to his own church, because of the demographic in his own communication. You know, the greatest volunteerism movement in the world is the church. The sheer volume of volunteers doing things because of the good heart and the desire to please God is so massive. I think it's very untapped. I think governments, institutions, and non-profits are unaware of how much capacity the church has.
Wow. So today I'm sitting with Pastor George. If you are in the Eastern Cape in South Africa and you don't know Father's House Church and Pastor George, I think you've been living under a rock. I'm hoping that we'll possibly get a tour of the facility if there's a bit of time. But this looks amazing. This looks great. And again, I just said thank you so much for sitting down with us. Let me read your bio here. I got something online. So for those of you who don't know Pastor George, so he started out in ministry as a student at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University and as a member of the AOG. So my background is AOG too. So that was in 1991, before I was born. He birthed a student community by starting a small group in the residence, which grew into a student church under Every Nation Church Africa. That's exciting. Yeah. Then after 12 years of fruitful ministry, Pastor George planted Father's House Church in 2010 and held its first service on Christmas Day with around 200 people attending. That's amazing. Yeah. And since then, the church has experienced exponential growth, and I think now, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, you've got over 5,000 people that call Father's House home.
Yeah, that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Look, I was just saying that I've never actually. You're the first pastor that I'm having on the platform, so I'm really grateful that you said yes. And I've actually never opened officially, in inverted commas, or started off the discussion with the word of prayer. Do you mind if can you pray first?
Firstly, thank you for the invitation. This was an easy yes, and I love what you're doing too. I'm excited to hear some of the outcomes from your book. Yeah. And
I've got a copy for you.
I would like it after you've signed it. But also, this is the first podcast conversation I'm doing that is not exclusively in the bubble of Christianity.
Oh, great.
Which I think is cool.
That's exciting.
So a quick word of prayer and then we do it.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah, Lord, thank you for the opportunity for engaging in conversation, for applying our minds, for contemplating, reflecting, learning, and growing. Thank you, Lord, that you will steer our conversation and guide us into things that are meaningful for all our subscribers, viewers, and listeners, that it'll be worthwhile sharing and worthwhile hearing. And we pray, Lord, that you will make this both meaningful and fruitful for us individually too. In Jesus' name.
Awesome. Amen. Thank you for that. Let's start with your upbringing. Yeah. All right. I think when I reached out to you, you said you were traveling. I just can't get the pronunciation right, is it?
Cyprus.
Cyprus.
Yes. Yeah. So I am a Cypriot Greek. So it is a Greek island, but it is its own country. So Greece has many islands, but then this one country is its own country, one island. And my family's from there, father and mother. But I was born in South Africa. I grew up in KZN and studied here in what was then UPE and is now NMU.
Yeah.
But I can speak and understand Greek.
Wow.
And we still have family and some business enterprises in Cyprus. So annually, I've been going to get my mother to go there and come back. She's not a good traveler on her own, and so that was where I was to engage with some of the stuff going on there. It's an interesting island. If anybody wants to have a look rather. It's not far from Israel, not far from Lebanon, and so that it was an interesting trip because stuff's going on at the moment in that part of the world.
So is your mom in South Africa?
Yeah.
Or? Okay.
So my mom and dad have lived our whole adult lives here. They came over as young adults, and my father passed away during COVID, and so
Sorry
my mother
to hear
is
that.
thank you. My mother is here, and we wondered if she wanted to move back to the island, but she doesn't. She wants to live all her life here, but potentially be buried one day on the island, which was a fascinating thing for me because her extended family and relatives, her siblings are all in Cyprus,
Oh.
but she still loves Africa.
Wow.
Yeah. So because once my dad passed away, we wondered now if she has to go, must someone go with her, accommodate her, look after her? There's these considerations. So that's my background.
Siblings? No siblings?
I do. I have three brothers. I'm the oldest. Interestingly, one is in the city here.
Oh.
Who probably does not want to be known as George's brother. And two are still in KZN.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a little place in KZN called St. Lucia,
Okay.
which is about 2 hours north of Durban. And that's where I grew up.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Look, your story is very fascinating to me because I've got a lot of people that I know that have been part of Father's House, and it's a very popular church, very well-known brand in the city and in the Eastern Cape, and I think that you guys have done. Obviously, we know it's the Lord, but I think you guys have done something amazing here. So I'm intrigued to find out how you guys started. But what I wanted us to talk about was some of the leadership insights from your journey as a pastor and in leading an organization of this stature. Because I know you've also got the foundation.
Yeah.
So there's the church, there's the foundation. What else is
Yeah,
there?
and the church has other churches, Father's House churches in other cities.
Yeah, I saw
that
George.
operate from here. Yeah, George was a fascinating one for us because we're very strongly a non-racial multicultural community. George is something else, ne? There's some few ex-presidents there. So, and yet what a beautiful place, what a beautiful people.
Yeah.
Very open-hearted and very eager for a multiracial, multicultural community. So that contributes to some of that conversation. And I think to your question on some leadership dynamics.
Let's start with let's start with how you guys started.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Let's dig
sure.
into that a bit.
So as the Father's House component, let me take you back to university for a few minutes. I think the struggle for me at university, so I attended NMU. The struggle for me was that at the time, before you were born,
2 years before.
2 years before you were born. Yeah, you're a young man. Huh? Many things still to learn, many things still to do. I think the struggle was that the intellectualism and perhaps the humanism, the gratify yourself mindset was sweeping through the young adult mind. Bear in mind that I was at the university 91, 94, 95. I'm there. So now we go from a non-democratic, predominantly Afrikaans-speaking white university to a new nation, the release of Nelson Mandela, the first democratic election, and the introduction of a non-racial campus.
Yeah.
And then I was there all the way through to the merging of those various institutions. You know, we had technicons and teachers training colleges and all these things that merged together.
Yeah.
What became apparent to me was an anxiety and nervousness about this new world. And that created a birthplace for people to ask some important spiritual questions. It's in that context that I began a community at the university. We were res students, and we were trying to figure each other out.
Was there nothing like that at the time? Or?
There was in fact always at the university an Afrikaans Dutch Reformed church.
Oh, okay.
They used to call it Studentengemeente,
Okay.
and used to meet on the campus. But now, that's not always the answer for everybody, because it's very language specific and style specific. So we thought, well, what if we strip that away? Interdenominational, non-racial, conversational, not lecture. Because a lot of churches lecture. It's a monologue, right?
Yeah.
So conversation, that's why groups are so passionate. I still do mentorship group in my home 2 nights a week, different groups. And so we took what was, I think, I think they called it the rec room at the res. I was in the res Xanadu. And we started with 20, 30 students, and within a year it was
20,
100.
30 students is a lot, though.
So it's
So
just
how
a
do
lot,
you-
but when you're in res and you don't have a car to go anywhere, it's not a lot.
Okay.
But like, hey, it's something to do, you know? So it was like, hey, we're having this religious conversation. Everyone wants to ask questions, you come. There was no singing and all that. I wouldn't, I can't
Deliberately.
sing. We didn't have equipment, and we didn't see it as necessary. Well, you see, once you start singing, you start defining style,
Got you.
and that comes later. So it was conversational. Every week we would meet there, 20, 30 students, start talking about the Bible and its relevance today, if at all, its relevance in this new birth of a nation, and this, is it to be blamed for some of the past? Can it be explained? Can it not? And by the time that year ended academically, we were past 100 in that rec room. So then one of the lecturers, actually one of the sports coaches, a guy who was a famous rugby player, Hannes Murray. He used to look after that res. Then he came to me and he said, why don't you take the auditorium? I'll go with you, and we'll take the auditorium and see if we can't move that Wednesday night there. And we moved, and we did church on a Wednesday night, so you could still go to your churches on a Sunday, whatever your background was. And we did church on a Wednesday at the auditorium for probably 2 years until we went past
Still
500.
conversational,
Yes.
not like in the traditional.
No, that came later because Sunday was still Sunday. So we thought we could do something. And we actually called it house church.
Okay.
Come to my house, let's have church.
Wow.
And I still do that. It's still the one thing I feel, having people in my home, in fact, and having a conversation about scripture, still my most meaningful part of a week, even though I speak to a couple of thousand people on a Sunday.
Yeah. And who are you looking up to at the time? I mean, who was the model for doing church in that type of way?
Actually, I don't know if it was so much in that type of way, but the inspiration for me was actually a man who's recently passed away, Pastor Ray McCauley.
Wow.
Because Ray McCauley, so respect to him, recently passed away. I watched his memorial.
Me too, actually.
Yeah, really powerful.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and the premiere there really, I mean, just the way everything was done.
Yeah.
And he was legit involved in SA's transition. A lot of pastors now say they were very involved in the transition, but you can't find photos. But he was definitely proper. But he inspired me because what he did was he gathered international speakers annually to his church, and he invited the country. And he said, do whatever you can, we'll accommodate you. Now, I'm a student, my parents are not happy that I'm in ministry. I'm the oldest. I came to do BCom. I'm Greek.
Mm.
Go home, help with the business, lower our tax burden. That was the assignment in life.
Yeah.
You know? And Ray would just say, come to Rayma. All these international speakers. If you don't have money, get yourself here. You can sleep on the floor in our foyer.
Wow.
That's what I did.
Wow.
And for 4 or 5 years,
Was
I
that
went
before
there.
you started or
Yeah.
during?
No, before. It was called Rayma Celebration.
Wow.
And a whole lot of us would go from the AOG.
Mm.
A couple of youngsters, we would go and we would listen to these different speakers talk about how to do stuff like that. Find your passion, your niche, your gift, your call, and then do it. And only later did speaking in a large thing become a thing. But it was this engagement of conversation that that I excelled at, I felt,
Yeah.
and was fruitful.
Business interest in terms of your family?
Yeah.
You just mentioned that.
Big entrepreneurial family, so we have the typical Greek things, and then we have some non-typical.
What are the
Greek
typical? I don't know what those are.
That's easy because your friends, subscribers will know exactly what I'm about if I refer to what we do with a corner. But the supermarkets,
Okay.
restaurants,
Okay.
then clothing stores, travel agencies.
Is that in South Africa or?
In South Africa?
Oh.
In Cyprus, my father purchased a lot of commercial and residential property and lets them out. So we have tenants.
Okay.
But like I think most foreign nationals here, he was wondering if there's a future here post 94 and prepared himself for that eventuality, to be honest. And then never landed up, even in his last years, I would often ask him, is it time? And he said, I'm not leaving Africa. So it's an interesting dynamic. That's a whole conversation by itself.
So how involved are you in the family businesses currently?
I was very involved until Father's House. So the university stage, yes. But once Father's House required the number of staff and activity that it requires, not at all involved.
Okay.
Now, I had some of my own businesses because during the university student ministry, none of us had budget. Not the students, not the university, not me. So I worked for an income and ran things. For instance, I installed AstroTurf for a couple of years. I had an AstroTurf and synthetic.
Is that during your university
grass.
days? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I enjoyed flipping houses because I could get a house in November as the university's students were going to exams. I would repair it with a small team, December, January, sell it, February, and have my budget for the year. And I did that 7 or 8 times. Now you can't really do it that way because of the credit thing. You could get funding for that on the promise of a tenant. But you can't do that anymore. But yes, absolutely, got involved in a number of those things. But there did come a time where I had to make a choice. Although I am involved in some things now.
Yeah. So take us back to that Christmas, December, when you officially decided, okay, we are. Was it an official church launch?
Yeah.
And what was happening in your life?
Yeah,
and most importantly, how you came to the realization that God had called you and commissioned you into this type of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was an important, challenging question because at some point you must finish your degree.
Yeah.
You can't drag it on any longer. Now I'm there because I'm a registered student. Now I'm adding a course and delaying a module and whatever, and then the years go by. I think 2 things impacted me. The first is campus life changed. And that had an impact on the way we were doing things. And we can talk about that a bit later. Second thing is I aged.
You seem surprised.
Yeah, it surprised me. It sure surprised me. But there comes a day when you're standing up there in front of, say, 700 students. By that stage, you move to the other 700 students, and you realize, I'm not cool anymore. Not for these guys. They need somebody 5 years older than them, not 15 years older than them. And it just had a sense that a season was concluding. Same time, though, there was a young man in the front row, G-Day, who had been with us a couple of years, and he was just
Who's that?
rising.
G-Day.
Yeah, Pariola.
Okay.
50% Xhosa, 50% Nigerian. Grew up in South Africa, studied at UJ, and was part of our team.
Wow.
And God, it was clear to me. God made it clear to me, he's the guy. And so I handed the campus work to a team, and I realized it was time for me to graduate from campus ministry work and get involved in the city. And part of that included that, once students graduate, they don't want to go back to campus for church also. And get married, then they have a kid, and life moves on. And so we were in that season. And then the challenge, the hunt was on finding an appropriate location, which is a big issue for me, because if you want to facilitate non-racialism in a church, you have to take geography into consideration.
Wow.
Because you can simply determine the demographic of your audience by how far you make them drive to get there.
Wow. That's an important point that a lot of people don't think about.
You can pray all you want, hey, Lord, I'd like a multicultural community. But if you are positioned such that a person from a certain background would require 100 rands to get to you and back, he's not coming. So the prayer is meaningful, but you are the one who must answer that prayer. You have to move. So we had to think about this. We landed up in Richmond Hill.
So who's we? Is it?
I had a team of 5 or 6 people who had worked with me at campus ministry. We were employing 2 or 3 of them already. Yeah, on campus. I think we had a staff of 6.
Are you kidding me?
Not joking.
How are you paying? How is that happening?
Flip a house, bro. Flip a house,
So were you funding it from your...
Yeah. Which later became an issue with my family, but it got resolved. But that certainly was a thing. And the congregation, some people, and you know what a lot of people did, and I must do a shout out to those people. They graduated, they left town, they got businesses, and they sent back.
Wow.
They said, listen, we were bused to church. I used to pay for a Goa bus. That's how I knew the CEO of a Goa bus who passed away not so long ago. I went to him and I said, I said to him, I need to get the gospel to students, but now they are living on reses off campus and what, how do we get them? So we were running 3 buses, one from Uitenhage, one from Western Road in Central, and one from one campus to the other. Then they would converge there. Now there's no money for that. It was millions a year. And the students who graduated would send back money. And that's how we resourced that.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, at that level.
And then the foundation was even then already, because he then said, why don't you do something that's an outreach? And I'll also help with busing, bring down the cost.
Reverend Duze.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I said, well, what can we do? And he said, well, you've got academic students and you've got a university. So we identified 3 schools in townships and bused their matrics to the university to do maths and science using third-year students, but using the labs at the university.
Wow.
Then Sanlam came on board. I don't know if I'm allowed to use brands. Came on board and helped sponsor that. We did that for about 8 years. Because you must remember, you'll know very well, those students were in theory studying science.
Yeah.
But the tools were not there in the school.
Wow.
So we then utilized that. And so that became the seedbed of church and foundation.
Wow.
Going back to the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah.
Your first couple of years, because I remember, so I attended quite a few of the campus days. The campus days.
Yeah.
2012, 2013.
Yeah.
Live Wire,
That's
I think. So I'm familiar. The name you mentioned sounds
G-Day was there, but you will have known Loyiso.
Yes.
Lloyd. He was next.
No, he was amazing.
It's very much interesting. The cell phone number I use is Lloyd's old number, because it was under the contract of church. Now and again, I get these long messages for Lloyd on my cell phone. I'm able to forward them on.
Oh.
But he took over from Jide. So Jide was there a bit, then Lloyd took over.
I remember.
Yeah.
I think I saw Jide.
Yeah. You will have met him. Tall guy.
Yeah.
A good-looking, well-spoken, articulate
Very
speaker.
charismatic.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Lloyd wasn't like that
Yeah.
in the charismatic side, but Lloyd was a builder.
Yes.
Bit
Yes,
by bit
yes.
by bit, we built.
Yes.
He has a lovely wife too,
Yeah.
Judith, and so they continued there. While I then started something, so we were still partnering together. We didn't just abandon. We were partnering together. I was doing the city.
So talk to us a bit about the transition from campus to city and how you managed to do that. Because I remember you guys, I think, started was it in not here?
No, Richmond Hill.
Richmond Hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we actually rented a building there from an Afrikaans congregation that had consolidated into another part of the city and left that one empty.
Because I'm also guessing you're not taking the students to that, so you have to now go and find other people.
Yeah.
So what's happening?
Yeah.
during
So
that time?
you WhatsApp and email anybody you remember who's still in the city. Hey man, I know you don't come to campus anymore, but I'm starting a thing. And 80% of them blue tick you. You're like, oh, sharp, I might be there. And you just start with 30, 40 people, 50 people, friends and friends of friends, and you get a little band together, some few people who can play some instruments together. And you just start, you know. We had about a 6-month budget to get going. And this community let us use the venue. 6 months for free, and then a rental agreement thereafter. So we sort of had to set it up within 6 months and make it viable. And Richmond Hill was accessible in my view. A lot of students were still living in the central area, so we didn't need to transport them anymore. And you know, students. Here's the thing about students: they often don't have economic resources in those days. Now a bit more because I see the cell phones and the sneakers, but. Didn't have a lot of economic resources, but have time.
Yeah.
So they invest in time, helping, serving, band, ushers, whatever you need. Often the students are the ones who are offering the hours, the manpower. And we just started. And I think we were only in that building 1.5 to 2 years, and it was no longer possible. Yeah, the issue was small, and you know Richmond Hill, everything is built on top of each other.
Yeah.
Ne? So I was creating noise pollution problems.
Okay.
Then the neighbors of the neighbors, they will call the metro. Then the metro will come on a Sunday, and they will take a decibel meter reading there at our door.
Gosh.
Yeah, and then they'll say you're over the limit. We're going to take your equipment if you don't make a plan. So the tension started. It was full, and it was creating neighborhood tension. And then we moved. A second venue in Richmond Hill is where the airline training center is now, which is in Stanley Street, where the restaurants are. Now that is a 400-seater. We left a 250-seater, 400-seater. But we were running 3 to 4 services on a Sunday. Now the restaurants come to us and say, but you're parking the whole street the whole day.
Yeah.
So that became a tension, and it became obvious we were going to have to move. There was a cutoff, and then we laid it up in a warehouse.
So what do you say to people that are starting out?
Yeah.
To a young pastor that wants to plant a church or is thinking of planting a church, what advice do you give to them based on the experience that you've had? I mean, how long has it been now?
Since starting Father's House.
Since 2010 you started,
2010,
right?
yeah.
So that's, 14 years.
14, going to 15.
Going to 15 years.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people starting out? What advice do you give them? Just in terms of the practicalities of starting out, what do you do? What mistakes do you avoid?
You know, the honest thing for me is the risk is to look at a lot of people's finished product on social media or YouTube and think, let me start where they're ending.
Got you.
There's a lot to do in leadership and ministry before you open your doors. It's your capacity in friendship building, your ability to mentor, your capability in networking, your capacity to document what God is saying as you understand it, as you understand Scripture. There's so much to do before doors open. And I think I should have done more, even myself. I'm grateful for the university season because they made me a pastor. I made a church at campus, but they made a pastor.
How so?
I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about multiculturalism. Oh, I said I wanted one. A multicultural life. I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I was embraced by a multicultural community who journeyed with me about why you don't say that. And you don't do that. And you know, I had to grasp. I mean, I went unuzaku zaku on behalf of people for negotiating of lobola because they wanted to introduce me to their world, foreign to me as a white who grew up in a white world, foreign. So I always credit campus ministry and that season for making me a pastor.
That's amazing.
And so I would encourage that. I'd encourage young people to do that. I'd encourage young leaders to do that. I would encourage them to take steps of faith. You don't have to wait for everything to be perfect before you start. You just have to start somewhere. Start in your lounge with a conversation and a handful of people and see if the result of that is people saying, that was meaningful to me. Let other people decide if you are ready.
Okay.
I wouldn't let myself decide if I'm ready. You either underestimate yourself or you overestimate yourself. Let other people confirm. When you read that verse and explained it, made sense to me. You get enough of that, you go, maybe I got something on the menu. There are a lot of people who are opening things that got nothing on the menu.
Sure.
And people don't eat. And that's a problem, you know. So I would encourage that.
I mean, it's been 14 years. And the church has grown. You know, you've got multiple locations or multiple campuses. So it's George. It's I think I saw on social media something about Cape Town.
Cape Town, Jeffreys Bay, and the surprise to me, which is Kariga.
Oh,
because they're so close.
Yeah,
they used to drive through, you know. And I thought, I don't know if people want another thing so close. To me, it's close, 15 minutes. But there's a thriving community there.
So how does that happen? How do you approach that part of the growth of the church, going out? And
two things happened for us simultaneously. The one is our online presence generates some people connecting to us and feeling like our approach to church makes sense to them. So irrespective of where they live, they log on. The second is Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha is a transient town in city in a lot of ways. People graduate, promote, or leave. But now they're in other cities and they're still connecting with us. So they find each other. And so we have a little model, you know, we call it on screen to on stage. You start with the screen until there are certain criteria met. And then we get a pastor to you who sets up a venue with a stage.
So is that, when you say you're starting with the screen, do you mean like a watch party type of?
Yeah. And often that starts midweek, but then transitions to a Sunday at someone's home, someone's business, someone's boardroom, and it migrates from there. We have a pastor on site here who serves as the point pastor for people who do that, so that we're not asking a volunteer who turns on a screen to also navigate marriage stuff or whatever. We'll do that from here. But to facilitate something like that until it seems that there is interest, an open door, and even a need. You know, a church, a city may not need our style at this time. May it just not be the right time for it. And so we wait until certain things come together. But the lesson I've learned is that the most important thing that must happen is the right man for the right place, the right leader.
It's a difficult one.
It's a difficult one because you can have everything else. If you don't have the person, you don't have anything yet.
So I've got a bunch of questions here and topics. In fact, we didn't even have. I should have told you that this is what I wanted to talk about. But,
We didn't have it.
But you're here.
That's all right. I'm happy.
Okay.
Apparently, I do better if I don't know.
All right. So the first one is church leadership and church governance.
Yeah.
So how do you guys approach it? And I mean, earlier, there's the foundation, there's the church, multiple sites, a whole lot of people. And how, in terms of your leadership style, how do you do it?
It's a very powerful and timely question. So I'm going to answer it by first saying, not well for a large part of my journey.
Okay.
And the reason, and the second part I want to say is there are big shifts in the church world on this topic at the moment. Because some pretty big names in Christianity have once again faltered.
Yeah.
In the 80s, there were a bunch of them, and they were moral failures. And now we have another wave at the moment, this year.
Which is very sad, actually.
It is sad. It's not unexpected. You know, I always tell people, be careful we don't treat the church differently to anything else. If somebody gets caught being fraudulent, we don't say, well, that whole industry is a disaster.
Yeah.
We just say, well, that's a fraudulent banker, that's a fraudulent estate agent, that's a fraudulent whatever.
Got you.
You don't say estate agencies should be closed, controlled, you know.
Yeah.
You just say, well, there's a problem there.
Yeah.
The church is a massive institution. I refer to not doing it well for a good push. I think the reason for that is there's a bit of independence in me. I like to be able to have an idea in the morning and implement it in the afternoon without a process. But the bigger something gets, the more unkind that is to those who come along.
Say that again? The bigger something gets?
The more unkind it is to the others who come along with you. So, for example, I'm single. I can change course without consequence on several things quite easily. But once you're employing people and have a core team who are married and have kids in schools, you can't just say, I'll tell you what, we're not on the university anymore. We're going to, we're going to go on, it starts, wait. What? So I think there's a lot of that consideration, and it causes anxiety. So we've had to go down the road of embracing leadership teams that have both executive and non-executive roles that help us guide some of the decision making, some places to bounce off things, certainly things like budget approval and salary structures, those kinds of things have to have a consultative process. We model our salaries and structures to a school.
Okay.
So we thought that would be a good benchmark. More or less the headmaster of a middle average school would be the salary of a senior pastor. And then an entry-level teacher would be an entry-level staff member and so forth and so forth. So you have to benchmark against something. Otherwise, you start benchmarking, as some churches do, against VW. And the CEO there and the pastor wants the same, you can go down some tense roads there. So I think, and then in the area of governance, we started something this year for the first time, which was to actually report on a monthly basis the income versus expenditure of the church publicly on a Sunday.
Sure.
And I think...
How often does that happen? Like once a year?
End of every month.
End of every month.
A graph.
Okay.
Just a graph tracking the two. We also announced number of new people to the church who joined the membership class, number of people baptized, number of people who completed an alpha course, number of people who got married and children dedicated that month. That's because more and more, even in large churches, a church like this would be referred to as a mega church, which is a church of over 2,000. People are not engaging with large things like that as spectators anymore. They consider themselves stakeholders. And you as a leader must treat them as a stakeholder. And so the level of engagement has radically changed. And I quite like it. It was hard to get there, but I quite like that.
So is there a board that holds the executive team accountable?
No. There is a board that holds the executive team accountable on on two things.
Okay.
The health of the team and the church,
Okay.
values, etc., vision, implementation. Are we doing what we said we were called to do? How healthy is the implementation? And secondly, is it in keeping with doctrinal or spiritual norms?
Got you.
So that a pastor doesn't go drifting into some personal passion and then making the personal passion the cause of his church.
Got you.
That can easily happen. So there is and then there's separate to that a finance board that signs off on the annual budget and the salary structure.
Okay.
And we implement that each year.
Okay.
Those two checks and balances, incredibly helpful. I still hold the role of defining what God has called us to do.
Yeah.
And I still hold the final sign off on on-ramping staff, but I'm the last part of a journey.
Okay.
HR meets, the department leader meets, and they recommend someone to me. Then I meet them and go, will this be a fit for where we're going and what we're doing? And that's getting harder as time goes by because, once again, age plays a role. When you employ young people, there is an expectation of a short to medium-term employment.
Okay.
Your generation and younger feels that a big long-term commitment is 3 to 5 years. My generation thinks a long-term commitment is until my last breath. So when you employ young adults, that generation, you can expect them for 3 years, 4. Really committed to a single cause, 5. But when you employ people a bit older, they're starting to think in terms of lifetime. This is a lifetime decision. And so the process requires more safety. And we've had to implement that because I haven't been great at that. And so it's been necessary to evolve. I'm not a free agent. Even campus was free, you know, it's a free agent. I'm used to people coming, they're very involved in your life for 3 years, graduate and leave, new people. Now, that attitude can carry over, but that's not how people want to live. They want to know, are we doing this thing for a long time together? And so that has had a big impact. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. You know, one thing I often wonder is how bigger churches navigate the relational aspect of being connected. You know, for me, that's, you know, when I look at some churches overseas that have 30, 40,000 members, the first question is, does the pastor know everyone?
Oh, no.
That's what I ask.
The pastor doesn't know everyone on staff at that level.
You know, so how do you guys navigate that part of, you know, being close, the relationships?
I think there are two ways to go. And both of them happen in South Africa. The one way to go is to the cultivation of the hero apostle.
Yeah.
The man of God.
That's very popular.
But no members of his church expects him to know them. They actually feel quite blessed if he touches them on the shoulder one day and says, good morning.
Surprisingly, that's a strong African
Massive
phenomenon.
Not just African, by the way.
Is
Can I go into controversial space? Also quite popular in the Afrikaans community.
Wow.
The general who leads us. There's a popularity there, which is why it's so fascinating to me that you will often see large congregations that are almost equally populated by an African community and an Afrikaans community, which would seem contradictory in South Africa, but both love a leader. If we ever get into how different communities, and by communities I mean language and race, engage with leadership, we'll have a fun time on that. Because I tell a joke in my, it might be slightly risky, I'm not sure.
Tell it.
You think so? I tell a joke about volunteerism that represents this very well. And so the one, to finish up on that, there's the one approach of the great man of God. And I'm just blessed to be in the same room as him. I don't need him to know my name. And the other approach is to say, it depends on my level of engagement. If I want to get to know the pastor, I'll volunteer. I'll get into a small group. I'll come to the midweek stuff. And that's how we try and do it. Now, that doesn't mean you keep yourself aloof on Sunday. So I've gone for the second approach. I'm the guy for half an hour before the service who walks amongst the chairs and greets every person who's in the building. And anyone who comes 5 minutes early at Father's house will have a conversation with me. And I quite like that. Now, I've come from, you stay in the holy room, and during song 2, you are ushered to the holy front row. That doesn't work for me.
Have you done that before?
Yeah. Doesn't work for me. Because, you know, the theory is you're keeping your heart and mind pure for the preach. But what
Don't
that does is
distracted.
it messes with your heart, man. You start thinking of yourself in... Anyway, so back to the engagement based on culture. I tell this joke, but only to the volunteers, right? So if we can just keep it amongst ourselves. Our 100,000 people, just us. I can always, you know, the different cultures and how they volunteer. So for a white person who volunteers, their on-ramp to volunteering is, Pastor George, can we set up a coffee? No problem. When are you available? Oh, it's nearly December, holidays ago, January. We're in November now. He's available January. We're going to have coffee. Thank you very much for the coffee. I'm going to just let my wife know the next one we have together. We have coffee together. Yo, why don't you? I like you. You like me. Why don't you come watch my boy play rugby next Saturday? Now we're in March, eh? There's no volunteering yet. We're still coming together. Black people. First Sunday I announced we need volunteers. There's 25 to 30 black people waiting for me at the door. Pastor, you said, what do you need? Where? Just tell me where. And here's the thing with our black community. If I say to someone, hey, Loops, do me a favor, stand at the door there and greet the people. I must remember I asked that man to do that because 25 years from now, he's still standing there greeting that. I must go to him and say, you're relieved. You're relieved of your role. You can... Yeah, absolutely. And no complaints about how hard what I had to do to get here. I'm going to be here. Pastor needs me to please be at the door. Yo, man, the toughest one. I've got 2 more. The Indian community. We're not discussing anything until we have supper.
Okay.
You're coming to my house, you're eating my Indian food. If that works out, I'm going to help you. Colored people. Colored people. First Sunday they come to church, they're going to come to you and say, Pastor, you can rest now, I'm here. I can preach next Sunday even. I've done a lot of preaching. Can lead worship. My wife, you've never heard a voice like my wife's voice. Take off next Sunday, man. You've been working hard for the Lord. What's wrong with you? You understand what I mean? There's just a different... Now, why? Why is that important? It's important for me for a couple of reasons, because one of them is... Go for it.
Sorry.
No. Because one of them is it would be easy for me as a white guy to think, oh, the colored person is being arrogant. Oh, the black person is being disinterested. Oh, the white person is being difficult. Not so. It's their language of communication.
Okay.
You got to learn it and talk it.
Got you.
There's no point in being frustrated and saying, I wish you were more like. You got to say, what's that man's language of communication, that woman's language of communication? I must get on the communication track with them.
That's a great leadership competence.
Very
being
important.
Able to,
because I didn't at first. You must remember, I came out of campus that transitioned to predominantly black community. So I started thinking other races were difficult to lead.
And how did you break free from that? Time.
I'm one of those difficult white people. I had to look in the mirror and go, I expect to be taken for coffee when somebody wants me to get involved in something. And yet I'm judging someone else who also wants that. Just because I grew up in a community of predominantly black students for a long time, and it was relatively easy to say, we have a need, will you help us fill it? Like practically. Relatively easy. And so I had to wake up to the fact that, and in South Africa on a political level, I think one of our problems is we don't understand each other's communication method, not language. So speaking as a white person, observing some of our politics, I'm understanding black approach and humor more. I don't take some things as destructively as perhaps others do.
All right.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes I listen to certain politicians and I start smiling. I'm like, I know what he's doing. But if you just observe it from a distance, you think that's an obnoxious, destructive, but I see the nuance, which for me, I see it, which took time to develop. And so maintaining a multicultural or non-racial environment requires, I think, engaging in that space. I can't say to an Indian family, I don't do house visits. It's offensive. But I also can't say to another community, I'm quite hurt you didn't invite me to your house. That's just not a thing. There's some communities here, they know they invite me to their house, someone must be close to death, and I'm there to resurrect them. Other than that, I'm not cleaning up my house for the pastor to come visit. You see the tension around that and the difference. So I'm grateful for my journey in discovering those lessons. There's something beautiful about that. And we still have here academics now, lecturers, administrators at the university and others who were students with me.
Wow.
And we still have those conversations. And sometimes they're very honest conversations. It's like, hey, George, we're shifting a little too much this way or that. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on this. And that's been very, very important.
Now, church and politics, because you mentioned something now about being able to interpret what, So what's your sense of how the church should relate to politics? What do you think about that?
We're sitting here on the day of the American election, right? As this conversation takes place. And I've watched the American church. Their level of engagement's wild.
Did President Trump won, right?
I think so, yeah. When we sat down, he was at 267 of the electoral college vote, so I wasn't sure beyond that. And I've actually got my phone vibrating, sitting here under my legs here, I'm interested to see what happens there. But it looked pretty certain. I think there is a fear factor in the church in South Africa about involvement. The fear is that you will divide your members. It's not the opinion, it's the dividing. Now, for me, I think we should take responsibility for motivating civic duty. Get involved. And I think that we should take responsibility for calling out immoral or unrighteous conduct. And I think we should role model in our communities excellence. In tackling problems, in resolving tensions and so forth, that it can be a representation of what can happen beyond that. I regret that at the moment, it seems to me, in general, a preacher cannot declare his support for or against anyone. It would be too divisive. And that's a pity because we should be able to freely say, I'll sit with you, you're an XYZ man, you're sitting with me, I'm an ABC man, and we can talk about it. But there isn't that freedom yet. Now for me...
In the church?
In the church. Now for me, and let me put it to you this way, because maybe you have a different view on it, I especially feel that way as a white man. There is still a bit of, for me, there is still a bit of guilt. Now, I never once voted in the old apartheid era. My first election that I was eligible to vote was the first Democratic. But there's still a certain amount of tension around me being able to say, I disagree with that guy, he is an immoral guy or a crook or whatever, if he is black. There's a tension in me about that because it makes me ask myself the question, will some think you're going to find a problem with any black guy?
Well, what are people going to say?
You understand what I mean? So I think that's a regrettable condition to be in because we're actually all here for the common good. We want to be here for the common good, and holding each other accountable is very important. In fact, I have one leader who is quite actively involved in one of the new parties, was before, but in one of the new parties that that got a seat or two in Parliament in the national election. And she keeps an eye on me not drifting in my comments into the space. So she has the authority to text me and say, watch out. Don't diss the mayor. Like an example. So you said you had Athol Trollop on.
Yeah.
Now, here's my tension. So here's a good one. I'd love to hear your... So Athol was a member of the church.
Yes.
Now Athol says to me, I'd like you to pray for me because I'm gonna run for this thing. Now if I pray for him,
Doesn't mean you're endorsing him.
and he's the only white guy I've prayed for. Why not Gary? Why not what?
Yeah.
Where's Ngaba Faku? Where's...
Yes.
So the question arises in me as his pastor, if I say no, it is because he is white. And as a man in the political landscape of South Africa, if I say yes, it is because he is white. Now what do I do? It was a tough one for me because he was sitting here in the rows.
What did you do?
I prayed for him. But I only did so, I prayed for him privately. So what only a handful of people knows, prior to his election, he would come here on a Monday, which is when the church is closed for cleanup, and we would sit here and pray.
Wow.
Privately.
Before he became mayor.
Correct. And then only after he became mayor, I publicly prayed for his tenure as the servant of us all. So that I did nothing in public before his election and then publicly. And then I was challenged and in this way. And I hold to the same view that any mayor from any political background who seeks God's blessing for their tenure is welcome. I'll stand him on this stage and we'll pray for him. It doesn't matter to me what the background is.
I think one of the things that to certain people made Pastor Ray,
yes,
not so popular is, I think during the Jacob Zuma presidency, he brought him in and gave him the platform.
And that was a tough one because I actually saw a friendship there.
Yeah.
More than...
Political.
Yes. Yeah. And so that made it very difficult. But let me tell you another thing, though. It made him unpopular amongst many, but not to his own church.
Okay.
Because of the demographic in his own congregation. It was not out of place in his congregation. I feel it was out of place. But in his congregation, where perhaps 60% of that community is Zulu-speaking black South African. Do you understand what I mean? Now you've got that other tension, of these are my people, and they actually quite like him, and he would like an audience, with the guy symbolizing spiritual stuff in South Africa. Yeah. I wouldn't have done it, but I don't have a church that size, so I might as well. What I know, I just see the tension around being very careful. I was invited to speak. That Zuma time, there was a time when there was civil upheaval at getting him out of office.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And I was invited to speak outside town hall. Now, what do you say at a rally? Because now, I want to call out criminal behavior, but I don't want to seem like I'm wearing the colors of a particular party. Yeah. So what did I do? So I went and spoke, and this was my appeal. My appeal was, dear ruling party, this is not the best man you have amongst you. At least give us your best. Yeah. That was my message.
Wow.
You see, because they were at that moment the ruling party, elected by a majority of this nation. My argument was, you didn't give us your best man amongst your own ranks. Yeah. Before I even talk about whether there are other men or women in other places, that's not your best.
Yeah. So are you then saying that as a pastor, you shouldn't be vocal about who you support?
I'm saying that large communities generally are not ready for their pastors to say who they support.
Okay.
You can. It will just simply affect your community. So I have to ask myself, is that a price I'm willing to pay? And my answer is no. My cause is to share the gospel to as many human beings as possible.
Gotcha.
If that is my cause, then anything that works against that cause, though important, I must not. Listen, it goes down other things. Let's take a cheaper example. How much about the climate should I be involved in? Should I be wearing something in defense of the rhino population? Should I engage in the issue of gender identity? These are all causes that have both merit and demerit, have tension and value, but could they then limit me from being able to share Jesus? And the answer is yes, it will limit me. So I take them off the agenda. I keep the agenda very simple: Christ and spiritual growth from there. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No,
is that
it
a
does.
compromise?
No. Look, I think I'm not a pastor, but keeping the main thing is important.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've met people and pastors that do fall into that trap of being way too vocal, and that at the end of the day does sort of divide the people.
Yeah.
You know? Because people have certain assumptions. If you say this, then they box you into a particular type of person. Then they look at your messages through a particular lens.
I'm so glad you said that.
You know?
Because now they think you preaching on Samson and Delilah. Is that do you think that's Jake?
Yeah.
Like, who are you talking about exactly? Like, what's going on here with this guy and this story? And you are suddenly creating an additional filter through which people look at you. 100% right. I do wish, though, that it would be possible for me to attend a rally and do a thing. Like, not in the building, outside of the building. But we're still not there yet. In significant portions of the community in South Africa, we're not there yet. Where I can go on, preach on Sunday, but go on Saturday to a rally on a thing and make my voice because people will say, but that's connected to that, and the leaders of that are connected to that, so therefore you are. You know, you see, we're there. But can I just tell you, it's going better and better on this in South Africa. It's at its best it's ever been since democracy. Those men's groups and mentorship groups I run at my home are multicultural, non-racial. It's mind-blowing how healthy the conversation is in the 25 and younger. I'm very inspired. I'm very excited about the future. The next generation is by far the best generation.
Wow.
By far.
Yeah. I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts are. I mean, on some of the misconceptions in pastoral work. I mean, you've got the experience. People may look at you and sort of have their own misconceptions of the type of life that you lead and all of that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they'll see you traveling and then they'll say, you know. So what are some general misconceptions that people might have about pastoral work generally that you've gleaned over the years?
It's such a great question. I think two things stand out. The first is the easy life.
All right.
That's summarized in
Only
the...
work on Sundays.
Yeah, work on Sundays. The easy life and a very prosperous life. It's amazing to me that most people don't know that a church is run like an institutional organization, not a family business. At least the ones I'm involved in. So I'm a salaried person. If the church next month has doubled the income, I'm on the same salary. Mine is reviewed annually. So I'm amazed by that because, there's always these jokes. There's this one joke, I might as well say, there's always these jokes. The kids are sitting there chatting amongst themselves, what does your dad do, what does your dad do, etc. So the one guy said, my dad's a psychologist. He talks to somebody for an hour and they give him $500.
Yeah.
The next guy says, my dad's a lawyer. He talks to you for an hour. My dad gets 1,000 rand. The last guy says, my dad's a preacher. He talks for an hour. They have to send out buckets to get all the money in. Now, that's just not, that's just outrageous. So that's a misconception. I think the other misconception is the idea that the predominant work we do is on a Sunday. It is not. My easiest day of the week is Sunday.
Is it?
Easy. On Monday, there's a divorcee who is asking me to see if I can save their marriage. On Tuesday, they've got a family whose child is anorexic and can't seem to break the cycle, and they're looking to their church for support. You've got financial situations are being retrenched. My small business is closing down. I've got positive stuff. I'm flying on Friday to officiate a funeral, but then I'm officiating a wedding and so on. There's positive stuff. We've been trying for a child. We've done IVF. We have a child. Come bless, come pray, come. It's that. That is a very emotional level of engagement. Not paperwork. It's emotional level of engagement, That is really remarkable and it is by far the bigger weight of the work than Sunday. And the bigger the congregation or community gets, at any point in time, one or two people are passing away in a month or two, and one or two people are giving birth. And you got to...
So navigating those emotions.
Yes. And I can say to them, guys, I've got 3 or 4 pastors who can come and help you, but they kind of would like to talk to the guy they see on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so that's a tension. And then in my case, I have a few other things, like I don't recommend that a lead pastor should be single. That brings its own tension, and that is the space I found myself in. And so that has other complexities, and you can't just go visit a couple, you want to have people in support and all that. So I think there's misconception around that, and I also think there's misconception around, there's the work you do on Sunday. There's the pastoral work you do throughout the week, the chaplaincy, the support, and how those two things navigate. But I think people misunderstand the weight of never being finished. And I took a sabbatical recently. Yeah, so I took a sabbatical recently. I just hit the wall on a couple of things. Maybe we'll unpack that sometime. And I built a little expansion to my home and all that, because my second passion is construction, right? Oh, that was nice. You start with nothing, and a month later you got something. It is finished. Here's the key. Never finished. The hurts aren't finished. The therapies aren't done. The counseling never finishes. It's never finished. And there's a weight on that.
Sure. I can feel that right now.
You know what I'm saying? It's not complete. You can just come back the next day and keep going till the day you are done, personally. And so for me, that feels a bit different to like a business where I completed that transaction or I completed that contract. I honored my obligation. I finished well at that job. You never have that. And so you have to work into your mind. This is why I have much more grace now than I ever did for a pastor who needs to go away for a bit and come back, approach things with fresh eye. Take a proper 3-week leave and come back. Because if you don't do that, it is there 24/7. So you can imagine now you talk to a man who says his wife's thinking of leaving him, or vice versa, a husband who wants to leave his wife, and you engage them on a Sunday. Listen, man, thanks for that message. It meant the world to us. This is where we're at. Okay, take down my number. Let me know how things are getting. That evening, you get a message. You know what happened? He said this to me. Later that evening, she sends a message. I made him supper. He didn't say thank you. And so it's just not done. And I think people don't get that. There's a verse in the Bible that says that you should share all good things with the one who leads you so that they too may be encouraged. I don't think people realize the only people who come and see us, usually, people with problems. I would like people without problems to make appointments. Hey, Pastor George, I'm just here to tell you, things are awesome, man.
Wow.
God is good. My marriage is so... We don't hear from those people. We hear from people on the very edge. Sometimes they bring us a corpse of a marriage.
Sure.
Hey, raise this thing. The guys who are happily married, they don't want to bother the pastor. That's why that verse is there saying, just say some nice things also about life, because otherwise all we deal with is the on the edge stuff.
Yeah, I guess it's that belief that no, pastor's too busy. You don't want to bother him with simple mundane things.
And yet it's about doing life together, and doing life must have its joys and its sorrows.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think you lose perspective a bit.
So what boundaries have you set in your pastoral work to protect yourself from, all of those demands that people place?
I don't know if I've been always wise about that, and hence the sabbatical thing, hitting a bit of a burnout wall, I think. But I think the boundaries include resolving any guilt you have for taking time off. I had that problem. I felt guilt. I think you have to have excellent team. I think you have to build a life that isn't only centered around church. Have friends who have hobbies and
that's an important
go do hobbies,
Very important.
Yeah. Otherwise, everything you talk shop all day and all night, it's always together. It's always, I think that's very healthy. I advocate mentorship. Find a mentor, unpack some of your stuff.
Do you have a mentor?
I do. A couple, but one in the city in particular has been invaluable to me, one of the pastors of a church here in the city.
Wow.
And recently I had him come and preach here to introduce him to my own congregation, because when I hit the wall, he was the guy who was there on a weekly basis.
Wow.
And I think one has to have, some people, because the thing is, I watch some young leaders coming up now, and the things they're agonizing about now that they think are life and death are nothing. But you need someone to tell you it's going to be fine. This is normal. This happens all the time. You didn't do something wrong. It's the normal. It's like the sun rises and sets. This happens. And because the first time something might happen, you might think, well, I'm the most useless leader ever. It's like we've all entrusted some role to someone in our church because they were bright-eyed and enthusiastic, only to be stabbed in the back sometime later or whatever. And when a leader experiences that, you go, oh, that's happened at last. Good, tick that one off. And but you don't know that. You think, how did that happen? How did I get? So I do think those kinds of boundaries are important. And then I have just moral boundaries. Never in a counseling session or conversation pastorally with a woman on my own. Watch out for after hours stuff. Never mix the line between pastoral and social. They're just good boundaries on that. Even in praying for people at the front, we ask men to pray for men and women to pray for women. Okay. Yeah. And I generally, by the way, prefer that if a husband or a wife comes forward for prayer, unless the matter has to do with their marriage, I prefer the spouses come together.
Okay.
Because, I don't think I should be praying for someone else's wife without the husband there.
Yeah.
Just my personal, unless the issue,
Yeah.
But I don't think I should be doing that. I think, because it can also be misunderstood,
Yeah.
Go home and you're not Pastor George said. Pastor George said there's some thorn in my side and I must remove it. And looks at him and goes, hey, I think you're the thorn. And he's phoning me, hey, what did you do to my wife?
Yeah.
And so it's that.
I used to have this thing saying with a friend of mine back in high school that you can't drink water in a beer bottle.
Yes.
Because to you it's innocent. It's just water, and maybe to the next person, whatever their belief system is.
You've set yourself up for a problem.
Yeah.
If you do that.
Yeah.
And I think you have to, you really have to. But I must say, it's worth balancing this by saying the majority, 90% or more, of people and their needs are reasonable and considerate and honoring. And it would be unfair to take the handful of perhaps people who don't have good social skills and boundaries or whatever, and paint the whole community with it. That's not fair. And so I try to avoid that. I try to not let an extreme person affect my attitude for all the normal, healthy people who just want to have a conversation or unpack a thing or need a bit of advice. It's really the minority. But isn't it often the case the minority are often the loudest?
Yeah.
And so I have to be careful that doesn't dominate my thinking.
Yeah. Pastor George, thank you so much, man. Thank you for the conversation. What's next for you? What's next for Father's House?
You know, I've just gotten into my 50s.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks
When was
very
that?
much.
This year? Last
no,
year?
I'm 52, yeah.
52.
I'm feeling an increasing passion to raise leadership.
Wow.
And to make my life transferable. And so there are internships and apprenticeship programs that are activating that. But in the next 10 years, or 15, let's say, because it's 15 years to this point, in the next 15 years, I would like to be in the front row of a lot of congregations cheering men and women on the pulpit.
Wow.
That I had some hand in pulling forward.
Developing, yeah.
If I can do that, I will feel deep fulfillment. And identifying, navigating, maturing, raising, that will be a wonderful thing. So I think that's next. And for Father's House, you know, I personally believe that the voice of the church will get clearer, it will get louder, but it will also get larger. I don't agree with the doomsday prophets who believe in a tiny community of extreme Christians hidden in a forest somewhere, waiting for the great trumpet so that they can go home. I think that we will be an invaluable contributor to society, both socially and morally. I think that we will be clearer in our voice, not just louder, because a loud, unclear voice is irritating. Clearer in our voice, but
wow. Say
louder.
that again. A loud, unclear voice is irritating.
It's very irritating. I don't know what you're saying, and you're screaming the whole time. What are you saying? But I think if we can be clear about what our voice is, and we can be bold when necessary, I think that's the role. And I think we have to pick up a lot of stuff government will never get to. The widow and the orphan. We got to look after the old. We got to look after the newborn. We've got to navigate people through their mental health crisis. We've got to step in there. There are not enough institutions funded by governments or even the private sector that can handle all that. We, as the church, must be a safe place and a soft place for everybody to land.
Wow.
And that's what I dream of.
If I may ask practically, would that be through the church itself or through setting up a non-profit institution that would focus on all of those things?
It's safer to do a non-profit and populate it with the volunteers of a church.
Got you.
Simply because of the dilution of the message.
Okay.
But once you've activated your members to want to make a difference, now you must give them something to do.
Got you.
And what you can't say is be more like me, just become a preacher. There's a handful of us that are needed for that. But you activate members and then you have them leave here very enthusiastic but nowhere to go. So I think the more avenues we can create and motivate the people that can get involved. You know, the greatest volunteerism movement in the world is the church. The sheer volume of volunteers doing things because of the good heart and the desire to please God is so massive. I think it's very untapped. I think governments, institutions, and non-profits are unaware of how much capacity the church has.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It hasn't been welcomed at times because of our own fault. But I think that's being cleaned up. And I think that partnership's going to be invaluable in the future.
Awesome.
It's already happening in one way. You had Gift of the Givers on your podcast.
Yeah.
That's in a sense also the arm of a religious institution, but welcomed. I quite admire how that's been navigated.
Yeah, me too.
I dream of that also.
No, man. No, thank you again. I mean, you're doing amazing work here. And, praying for your ministry and the work that you're doing, that
Yeah,
it
thank
may
you.
grow and impact the whole of South Africa.
Yeah.
So thanks for sitting down with us.
Yeah,
Got a
it's been
copy of
awesome.
the book.
Oh,
so
now
it's for you.
that I'm excited about. I also
When
yeah?
is your book coming out?
Now you see now, I hope my staff team won't hear this part because I get monthly text messages about that. And now the tools available to be able to put your thoughts together.
Yeah.
There's no excuse.
Yeah.
I felt disqualified to put it on writing until recently. I think I'm ready.
Amen to that.
So I'll take you as one of the confirmations.
Amen to that.
I'll add that in the prefix.
Please.
But I also want to say to you, keep inspiring and keep pioneering. Because there's a whole generation of people with a very similar background to yours who shouldn't be looking to people like me with a background like mine for inspiration.
Wow. Wow. Thanks. Thank you, Pastor
Thank you.
George.
That was awesome.
Thanks a lot, man.